My name is Trischler, and I'm interviewing Mr. Grandizio, and he's been my advisor for 3 years. Is it okay if I interview you?
It is, yeah.
So tell me about growing up in Pittsburgh, what that was like.
Growing up in Pittsburgh was a great place to grow up. I grew up here on Shady Side's campus. My dad worked at Shady Side for over 30 years. He was a football coach and coached baseball and wrestling and an athletic director. And so I went to Shady Side because of that. Great place to be. Pittsburgh wasn't all that great in the 70s and 80s. It's much better now than it was, but Shady Side was a good place to grow up. Loved it. Didn't think I would end up back here. I thought I'd be one of those people that moved away and stayed away, but definitely pulled me back in because of the changes to the city and the changes to the school. And it's just been I've been here I've lived back in Pittsburgh now for 25 years, so it's a great place.
As a student at SSA, what was your experience like?
I had a great experience at Shady Side. It was a different place back then. I had a lot of fun. I was heavily immersed in sports. That was definitely my thing. I played 3 sports. Dreamed about it, thought about it. It was my main reason for going to school every day so I could play sports. I wish I would have gotten more involved in clubs and did a little bit in the arts, but not much, not enough. I wish I would have done some of those things. But great place to go to school. Obviously prepared me for college, but I think more importantly prepared me for being a good human. Just knowing how to connect with a lot of different types of people, how to think of others first before yourself. Shady Side really instilled those values in me, and I think those are some of the most important things that I gained from my time here for sure. It's a good place to grow up, good place to go to school.
What was your time like on the athletic teams? Like, expand more on that, I guess.
Yeah, so my class was not a particularly athletic class. We didn't win as much as I would have liked us to. The class before me and a couple classes after me were really athletic, so I was a part of some of those on the fringe. But my senior year was a lot of losing. Unfortunately, I did pretty well individually, but would have liked to have won more. But I had amazing coaches. People like Gene Deal and Bill McCabe and Tim Giel and Alex Housen and Harry Fleischman, just really amazing, people who had been at Shady Side for a long, long time and knew what it took to succeed, knew how to teach. That was the big thing. I learned a lot, just not about the sports and how to play those sports, but also about how to be a good teammate, how to be a leader. I was a captain for 3 teams in my senior year, and so I took that seriously. That was important to me. But those guys really helped me understand what that meant to be a captain and how to put yourself, a second to the team. My dad instilled that a lot too, but it means something more when it comes from people other than your own parents. And I think I was fortunate to have that crew of people guiding me along the way.
Being a leader on those SSA teams, how do you think that affected your time in the classroom?
As a student?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like I said, having sports at the end of the day was always a motivator for me. It was always a way to say, if you're not doing these things, you're not going to get this at the end of the day. And so while I valued the academic side, I had amazing teachers, obviously, like so many incredible teachers. And I really loved going to school here and being in the classroom. You're not going to feel that way every day when you're going to class. So there are days where you need the idea of practice at the end of the day to really pull you through the lull or pull you through a day when you're not feeling up to it, and give you something to look forward to, like a capstone to your day. So that was definitely important to me. I think it also, the habits you learn on the athletic field carry over into all of life, including your academic side, including becoming a parent, including working in the workspace. That's the reason schools and governments spend so much money on athletic programs, because there are so many values that you can gain through that experience. I don't think I would be as personable. I don't think I would be as much of a leader. I don't think I would be as comfortable in a wide variety of groups if it wasn't for my involvement in sports, and more particularly my involvement in sports at Shady Side, for sure.
Coming back to Shady Side as a faculty member, have you noticed a difference between the classroom environments from when you were a student to now?
Yeah, so it's hard to say one's better than the other, but I would say the big difference is just the student voice in the classroom. I think when I was a student here, it was more lecture-based. It was more of the teacher as the master, and you kind of, you had to think, you had to problem solve, you had to do all those things we talk about now, but I think there's a little bit more memorization, a little bit more emphasis on the notes that you were taking, and achieving certain, steps along the way. I think now it's a little bit more student voice, more discussion based, which I think would be great for me. I think it's better for a lot of students, but that would have been great for me too. I think Shadyside's also probably less concerned with the little things than they used to be. It used to be really strict dress code. It used to be really strict in terms of like when you turned assignments in, when you took your tests and all those things. I think the fact that we've adjusted for learning styles, and we've adjusted for just the change in this generation of students, I think is important. And I think that's made it a different place, and a better fit for a lot of other different types of students, which I think is great.
Well, when you were as a student, what was your college process like? How did you choose where you were going?
Okay, so this is a famous story I tell everybody about my college process. First, I knew I wanted to go south, and I wanted to play baseball. And if I could play football too, that might be great. So I did think of some schools where I might be able to play football and baseball, Division III schools. None seemed to be the right fit for me. What I thank on a daily basis, I'm thankful for the fact that my parents and Mr. Housen, who was the director of college counseling at that time, steered me to understand. It's what I've tried to pass on to students as a coach and as a teacher and as an administrator here. Find the academic fit and hope that the athletics fit your needs. And that's really what I focused on when I was looking at college. So I knew I wanted to be south, especially if I was going to play baseball. It's just a better environment. But it had to take a backseat to the academic experience. So when we made my list of schools, it was primarily southern schools, a few in the north. I visited the southern schools, really liked a lot of them. I was not heavily recruited. It's maybe, in some sports not even recruited at all. But in my mind, I wanted to play at the highest possible level. And so it just so happened that two schools that were small schools, very similar to Shadyside Academy, good liberal arts colleges, played Division I baseball, but played kind of on a lower level than the big name schools. But also had amazing academic programs. So there were two really good fits for me, and that was Furman University and the University of Richmond. So those were the two that I was debating. I had equal opportunities at both places in terms of baseball. I was going to be a walk-on at either place. I loved both campuses. I knew people that had experiences at both of those schools. I really struggled with the decision. I had a lot of support from people here. But I was living in the dorm my senior year, and everybody in the dorm seemed to know where they were going to go to college, and they all had their gear, their sweatshirts, their hats, their t-shirts, all this kind of stuff. And I just was struggling with this decision whether I should go to Furman or Richmond. And every time I thought about it, I would, I just couldn't come to a conclusion. And so on a whim in the dorm, I said, I'm just going to flip a coin. And my friends in the dorm couldn't believe it. They thought that's crazy to just put all your eggs into a coin toss. But I'd had it. I was ready to make a decision, so I flipped the coin. It was heads, and I went to Furman, and never looked back. It was a great place, great fit for me. Went there got my undergrad, got my graduate degree there. I have a master's from Furman as well. I played baseball for 4 years, was captain of the team my senior year. It really worked out. Eventually met my wife, who's from that area as well. So that little coin flip, that really made a big difference in my life.
Talking about your sports at SSA more, going back on that, tell me more about the teams that you played on and how those people, and if you're maybe still in contact with them, how that...
Yeah, I'm in contact with a few of them. Mr. Rohr, who's the CFO here at Shadyside, played baseball. We played baseball together. He's a year behind me. Mr. Griffith and I were football teammates. A couple other people who have worked at Shadyside, like Terrence Parham, played football with him as well. So there's been a few people. I'm in touch with a few of them, not all of them. My junior year, all three teams that I was on were really good. My junior year, all three teams I was on were not very good. And so I think successful teams tend to keep in touch as they get on in their years. I think that connection is really something special. I think part of the reason I'm not as connected to the people that I played with in my senior year is because we didn't achieve a lot of success, and there weren't those great memories that I think the class before me had, or the couple classes after me. Those classes are really connected, really tight. I'm friendly with a lot of those people. I'm friendly with a lot of people from my class, but like lifelong relationships with those people, not as much. And I think a lot of that has to do with, there's a little bit of a lack of success there, and that makes it hard. Yeah.
When you were on the athletic teams as a player, were they in the WPIAL yet, or?
No, we were in the IPSL, so we're still in the prep school league, which meant we had a small, only about 5 teams were in our league. We played all of our league games on Saturdays, and then we played Whitfield schools during the week in baseball, and I wrestled in wrestling and football. We just played IPSL teams on the weekends. Meant a lot of travel to Ohio and to Kiski, and we went to Buffalo to play Nichols School. We went to West Virginia to play Lindsley. Shortly thereafter, so 3 years after I graduated, we joined the Whitfield, and I think when I was a student here, we wanted to be in the Whitfield. There are a lot of people, it was controversial at the time because how can a private school play in a public school league? I think it's been one of the most important decisions that we've made as a school at Shadyside is to join the Whitfield. As someone who coached here and was able to compete and see my kids compete at the Whitfield level against the competition that they have in playoff situations and Whitfield championships and state playoffs, that's just something I was a little jealous of as a coach, that I didn't get to experience that as a student here, but it was amazing to see. I think it's been a great decision by the school to do that.
Going back to your college days, after you graduated Furman, what did you do before you came back to SC?
Yeah, so I went to graduate school there too. I had a week off between graduation and when I started a graduate assistantship at Furman, and I did that for 2 years. My goal was to get into sports marketing, sports information, kind of like the administrative side of that, and I wanted to do it at a college setting. I also worked in the fitness industry, so I was in a lot of fitness management and personal training, and I did a lot of those types of things. My master's degree is actually in health and exercise physiology. So did a couple of those things. I tried to get into the college field. I was a finalist at jobs at Penn State and Florida State, didn't quite get there. And so I moved home trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't ever think I would work at Shadyside. I didn't ever think I would be a coach. But the coach that coached me at Shadyside was still coaching baseball here. And they were looking for an assistant coach. A coach had just recently quit. He heard I was back in town, asked me if I could come out and help for however long it could be. And honestly, I remember being probably about day 3, just kind of hit me that maybe this is what I was supposed to do. And I think because my dad did it, I probably fought it a little bit to say, like, I'm gonna do something different. As a matter of fact, my dad told me not to do it. My dad wanted me to go out and make money, not make a teacher's salary. So I think I was pushed away from that a little bit in my own mind too. But I knew on day 3 this felt right, and it felt right at Shadyside. I didn't know that I would be here 25 years later. I didn't know all that I would do. I never thought I'd move into admissions. That wasn't on my radar, but it's been awesome. It's been a great decision, and I kind of just honestly kind of stumbled upon it. I don't know what I would do if I wouldn't have gotten that phone call from Coach Housen, in 1999. It's crazy.
How do you think you coming back to the school as a faculty member, how do you think being a student has helped you being a faculty member now?
Well, I mean, it definitely helps me in my admissions job because I can talk firsthand about the experiences that students have. Even though the Shadyside I went to was quite different, it still helps families to meet somebody who has been through this, has a child at Shadyside. So I have many different perspectives on Shadyside: the student, the employee, the teacher, the administrator, the parent. So there's no question it helps me in my day-to-day. Plus, some of the people who taught me and coached me still work here. I think people sometimes lean on me to have some memory of the school and some idea about the history and how we've done things. So I think that has all helped me in my job, and definitely in admissions, to have someone who's lived it and gone to school here. I think people appreciate having that perspective.
Was your first job at SSA in admissions, or? No,
I was the assistant athletic director, and I coached 3 sports from 1999 to 2010, and then I moved into 2009, and then I moved into admissions in the fall of 2010. But when I was the assistant athletic director, I was on the admissions committee, so I did that work for about 10 years. So I've been reading files and meeting as a committee to make decisions about students for about 10 years before I moved into admissions. But about half my career was in athletics, and then the other half in admissions.
Tell me about those years being a coach at SSA.
Yeah, it was great. I coached, I was assistant football coach for 11 years, head baseball coach for 18 years, coached wrestling for, I think it was only about 5 years. I was assistant coach there. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Again, it wasn't something that I dreamed of doing. It wasn't something that I thought I would end up doing, and I kind of stumbled upon it. I love competing, and so when my playing days were over, I had about 3 or 4 years where I wasn't competing. rec league softball and things like that didn't appeal to me. It wasn't serious enough for me. And so coaching provided an outlet for that competitive side of me. You definitely have to adjust to it because you have less control than when you're a player. And so that was a hard thing for me when I was a young coach. But definitely, I think I took more pride and got more enthusiastic when I saw a student achieve or reach a milestone than when I met my own milestone. So like when I think about how excited I got when I had a success as a student or an athlete, it doesn't come anywhere close to how good you feel when you see another student do it under your watch. So like we won the Whitfield Championship in baseball in 2009. I was ecstatic, but not because of what it meant to me, but because to see all these kids and their parents and how much it meant to the school. Just that is I don't think if you've never coached or never coached in some people have coached Little League or something like that, but unless you've coached at a serious level like this, I don't think you get like how powerful it is and how, and again, talking about success, the kids on that 2009 team that I coached that won the Whitfield overcame a lot of odds. I mean, it's hard to win a spring Whitfield championship at Shadyside. All the games are happening during final exam week. All of our kids are focused on college. A lot of other schools, some of those kids are not going off to college. A lot of them are not doing SAT, ACT, things like that. So right in the middle of spring playoffs, you're really given a lot of obstacles to overcome. And the spring teams at Shadyside have remarkably had success, but it's hard to get to that Whitfield championship level and definitely to that PIAA championship level. But that group was able to do it. And those guys are all really tight. They all still keep in touch. There's a really good bond between those guys because I think they know together they accomplished something great, and that's something that they'll always have as they move forward as adults.
Yeah. What about your other teams like wrestling, football?
Yeah, so we won the Whitfield and we were runner-up in the state in one of the years that I coached wrestling, which was also amazing because that's an insane sport. The time and effort that those kids put in, the abuse your body takes, even as a coach, because you're doing a lot of that with the kids. And wrestling of all the sports was probably my third sport. But to see kids who were state champions, there's some incredible athletes. That was a really kind of a surprise how much that meant to me and how fun that was. Football, I coached some teams that we had some teams that were really down, and then we had some really great teams that competed. We lost in Whitfield playoffs to guys like Terrell Pryor, and we ran into some buzzsaws from Aliquippa, and so that was a different side of it. To have that kind of like Whitfield Friday Night Lights thing was something that I cherish. I mean, that's been a great experience for me. So, while I was head coach of baseball, and obviously that was the one that I was most committed to and probably have the most memories, the years doing football and wrestling were really impactful to me, and also gave me another outlet to really just see our kids like do something great and really excel. And it was great to be a part of that.
Other than the 2009 team, what about can you talk about more about the other teams maybe?
Yeah, so we were Whitfield. We made the playoffs at all 18 years that I coached except for one. We had 1 year where we didn't make it. It was a rebuilding year. But we made the playoffs every year. We made the Whitfield finals another year and lost. We made a lot of semifinals. We seemed to be always there at the semifinals, and then always run into a good. There was a group of teams that always seemed to really be there in our way. Elwood City, a lot of Beaver County teams, and so a lot of baseball that's really strong. They ended up in Neshannock, schools like that really just kind of, they were the dead end for us, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of great experiences. I think a lot of my good memories come from the teams that maybe weren't supposed to be good and ended up surprising people and making it into the playoffs or winning a few playoff games or getting to states or something like that. So as a coach, that's what you're probably doing a better job as a coach when you take a team like that and get them to the playoffs, as opposed to the team that won the championship for us that had a lot of talent and like all the starters were returning, and we had, a pitcher who ended up, pitching at Columbia and played in the Yankees minor league organization. So like we had some talent. We kind of knew we were going to be good that year. Other years where you didn't think you might be that good and you end up making the playoffs and surprising some people. Those are the really exciting times.
How do you think being a player on the athletic teams at SSA helped you as a coach for all those years in those different sports?
I think as a player, I was a kind of player that had to work hard. I didn't have a lot of natural gifts. Fortunately, I grew up as a coach's son, and I pretty much started with a ball in one hand and a bat in the other, and knew how to wrestle when I was 3 years old. I mean, all these things, thankfully, I had that in my life, and so I think that was a huge advantage. But in terms of actual natural ability, I think I always had to work harder than others. I was bound and determined to be the hardest worker on the field. Quite frankly, I don't think people would have expected me to have been able to play Division I baseball. I don't think people would have projected me that as a high school athlete. But I was able to do it and be successful there because I just outworked people, and I was obsessed with it, and I wanted to be great. And I think that's what carried over into the coaching career. If you want to be a great coach, you have to obsess over things. You have to make sacrifices. You have to commit time outside of the 3:45 to 5:40 athletic period. You have to be thinking about it on a Sunday afternoon. You have to be preparing for baseball season in November. And you can't do that unless you experience it as a player, in my opinion. I don't think you can fully do it unless you've experienced that as a player and know the sacrifices you have to make. And when you're a player, you're making those sacrifices for one person, right? For yourself, to make sure that you're able to compete. When you're a coach, you're making those sacrifices for a whole roster of kids. And so I think the playing career was a microcosm of what I was going to experience as a coach. And there were definitely I think a lot of my success came from the fact that I was a player and that I had to work hard all the time. I could not take a day off. I couldn't just rest on my ability and think that it was going to work out. And the same thing goes for coaching.
After those 18 years of coaching, what caused you to retire?
So so a couple things caused me to retire. I was doing admissions and coaching at the same time, which was a lot. Admissions, it used to be a little bit slower in the spring, but admissions is more of a year-round thing now. So that was one factor. I also had a daughter that was getting closer to her high school years and was going to be involved in a lot of activities. I had a son who was younger and getting into a lot of activities. And so what I found was that I was spending more time and energy on their lives, which is what you're supposed to do as a parent, right? So balancing that with the extra effort and energy that I needed to put into coaching, I would say my last 2 years as a coach, I think there was a conflict there between my life as a husband and a dad and my life as a coach and an administrator at Shadyside. It ended up being, I think, a little bit too much for me to do well. And I didn't ever want to do baseball and coach unless I knew I could do it really, really well. And so it's a tough decision, but it was one that the day after I announced I was retiring from coaching, I had an incredible weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt a burden that I owed something to these kids that I was coaching, but I also owed something to my own children and my wife. And I think it came down to, you have to make choices in life. And I think it was the right choice. I haven't looked back. I mean, there are days where I miss it and days where I look at that new complex and I'm like, wow, I would love to be able to coach on that new complex. But it was the right decision. Not an easy one, but it was definitely the right one. So.
Going back, talking about your dad, what do you remember from when he was a coach and what he did?
Yeah, so my dad was old school. I hate that terminology because I just think it sells somebody short. But my dad was definitely a tough kind of a disciplinarian as a coach. Players who played for him remember him, being strict, having rules, expecting people to stick to game plans, to follow the rules, to pretty much do what he tells them to do, right? I mean, that's really what you did. But they also love him like a father. He had great connections. It's unique in that he was able to be stern and a disciplinarian as a father and as a coach, but also be this like silly, lovable guy who could tell jokes and have a great sense of humor and make things that are really hard, he could make them fun. And so I think that's something that I tried to do. I mean, it's hard to follow in his footsteps. That's always been I don't want to say it's been a challenge for me because I haven't really focused on it all that much, but there's a lot of things that I would find myself doing as a coach or as a parent that I go, oh my gosh, this is like, I remember my dad kind of being this way too. So I think I just naturally inherited some of that, thankfully, because I think it's a huge key to any success that I've had. It's clearly having him as a dad and as a coach just made a world of difference for me. But he was very successful, in terms of wins and losses, but there's no question about it. The bigger thing to him was, what kind of human beings am I producing as a coach? Am I helping people become better people that are going to make a difference in the world? And the list of names and what these people have gone on to do with their lives who have played football for my dad, it's just remarkable. And I think it's because he was able to hold them accountable, be tough when he needed to be, but also be kind of like the funny uncle that you just want to hang out with. You know, he was really able to do that in a way that I don't think I've ever seen another coach do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.